back. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about cost of production. So we have a graph set up for us. This is going to be using our production function. So you guys can't really see that. So it's going to be using our production function. Now our production function, there's a glare, I'm sorry. The production function uses quantity of inputs to produce a certain quantity of outputs. So here we have our graph, we have our quantity of labor. This is our input, so this is something that the firm uses in order to produce their final product. And the total product is going to be on our Y. So as you can see, just think about it intuitively, as you hire more and more workers, you're going to be able to produce more. There gets to a point where you reach a peak. So this peak is the most amount that you can produce given your amount of labor. Now, you might think, why is it starting to decrease? Now, it decreases because of diminishing returns. Diminishing returns basically is saying the more and more you have of this input, the less and less productive you're going to be. Now, this is going back to our example of diminishing marginal utility or happiness that I talked about in the first week of class, where basically if I give you one cookie compared to the second cookie, how happy are you going to be? Or from the 7th to the 8th, from the 9th to the 10th. Again, you only have so much capacity in your stomach. It's not a bottomless pit. Same thing when it goes to producing products. You can only produce so much given the quantity. You can't hire an infinite amount of people to produce an infinite amount of products. It's just not realistic. So here we see different areas of this curve. So we'll see an increasing returns. So basically as we hire more, you see an increase. So this increase will probably be from here. So this is increasing. Now, diminishing returns, again, you're increasing while it's decreasing. So it's still here. So this would be diminishing. And then this portion right here, from this point down, you see as you hire more workers, your output actually decreases. So this would be a decrease or negative. So again, there's three portions. You see an increase because as you hire more, you produce more. Now you get to a point where as you hire more, it's starting to tail off. And then you start to see decrease where it's negative. So this is positive. This is constant. So diminishing. And then it's negative. All right, class. Now we're going to talk about marginal product. Marginal product is basically as you hire one more worker or you use one more input, how much more benefit is it going to bring your firm? So the formula for this is a change in total product divided by the change in labor. So if we're going from one worker to the second worker, how much more do they add to our total product? So we do this so we know what the optimal amount of workers we should hire. Is it too many? Is it too little? Or is it just right? So here we have our marginal product curve graphed. We have our marginal product on our Y and our quantity labor on our X. So as we hire more and more workers, we get more and more benefit. Now the peak is right here. So whatever this quantity is, this is the optimal amount of workers you should have. Again, you're maximizing your product. Whatever that number is, whether it be 0, whether it be 4, whether it be 1, 2, whatever amount that is. So from this point, you can see increasing, decreasing, and negative returns. So increasing returns would be from here to this point. So this would be increasing returns. From here, this point, to when it touches the x-axis, this is diminishing. And then past this is going to be negative. So negative, positive, and diminishing. Again, this is saying at this point, we have too many workers hired. So if you think about a job that you've had when you're overstaffed or you have too many people working, you're not as productive. You're adding less to your benefit or your product in this case. So it's reducing. You want to always maximize your product and minimize your costs in this case as well. So at QL1, this is the most efficient amount of workers we should have. Anything past this, we're going to see less and less product given to us. And if you're at this point, then you're saying that you've overhired, you have too many people working, and you're not as efficient. Now, this specifically is the marginal product of labor. So again, marginal product is for every additional worker that we hire. This is what this curve is showing. For every additional worker that we hire, how much more benefit are they adding to us? So you always want to maximize this. So this specific example right here is marginal product of labor. You could do this for capital, but specifically for the worksheet as well as a test, it'll always be labor. All right, so now we have some formulas that you're going to need to know for this chapter. We have our fixed cost. We've mentioned this before. This does not vary. An example would be rent. Variable cost, this does vary, so labor and raw materials. Now, the formula for total cost is fixed plus variable, so FC plus VC. Average fixed cost, average variable cost, and average total cost, this is specific to each quantity. So if we're looking at the first quantity, we're going to look at the fixed cost for that quantity divided by Q. If we're looking at the average variable cost of producing 2 units, it's going to be the variable cost of producing 2 units divided by Q. In that case, it would be 2. So this will make more sense when we have actual numbers in front of us, but these are formulas that you will need to know for the exam. So average fixed cost is fixed cost divided by Q, variable cost divided by Q, average total cost is total cost divided by Q, or just the sum of AFC and AVC. Now, marginal cost, this is a really important cost to know. This is the change in your overall cost divided by the change in quantity. So when you produce one more unit, an incremental change in that production, how much more does it increase your cost by? So this is important to know the optimal amount of quantity you should produce, no matter what market you're in or whatever product you're looking at. Marginal product of labor, this was discussed earlier. So it's just a change in total product divided by a change in labor. So for every additional worker that we hire, how much more product can we produce given that worker? We want to have the optimal amount of workers hired, and we also want to minimize our costs. So minimize our costs, maximize our product in this case, and we'll do a couple calculations in the next example. Before we get to the next example, I just want to talk about the short run versus long run cost. So short run cost is basically less flexible. So in the short run, let's just say you have a factory. You have to pay rent on the factory, utilities, and it's much harder to get out of your contract. Now in the long run, it's much more flexible. That's what we assume is going to happen. So let's say in the short run, you're locked into a contract for a year. It's hard to adjust your cost. The only cost that you can really adjust is hiring or firing workers to reduce your overall cost. Now, in terms of long run, let's just say your company is doing really well and you want to expand. So in the long run, you can get a bigger place where you would be paying a higher fixed cost. Now, long run, you're much more flexible. So let's just say you're not doing so well in the short run and you want to downsize in the future. You can get a smaller place or you can shut down shop. So costs are different in the short versus long. In the short run, it's mostly fixed. In the long run, it's much more variable. Again, in the long run, you can make changes if you need to accordingly. So if you're doing well, you can expand. If you're not doing well, you can downsize. In the short run, it's much harder to do this. All right, class, we're going to do our first practice problem. So here, I give you your quantity, fixed cost, variable cost, and I have these other columns that are blank. So you need to calculate total cost, average fixed cost, average variable cost, average total cost, and then marginal cost. You have all the formulas. We're just going to walk through this. This will help on the worksheet as well as the exam. So the first thing we're going to start with is fixed cost. So the reason why fixed cost is constant throughout is because fixed cost does not change no matter how much you produce. You still have to pay this amount no matter what, whether it be rent, utilities, whatever it may be. This is something that is going to be constant. So even when you're producing nothing, so at a quantity of 0, you're producing 0 things. You still have to keep the lights on. You still have to pay rent. Your total cost is just going to be fixed cost. Now, this is something important to know. Anytime you produce 0 units, you still have to pay fixed costs. Your variable cost is 0 because you're producing 0 products. But you still pay rent, so your total cost is fixed cost. So AFC is, we already know, it's fixed cost divided by quantity. So 16 divided by 0, you can't do that. You can't do average variable cost, 0 divided by 0. Average total cost, 16 divided by 0. Now marginal cost is also going to be nothing. So that is your first unit. So when you produce nothing, your total cost is going to be equal to your fixed cost. Now for the first unit of production. So when we produce 1 unit of whatever product we're looking at, it's going to be our fixed cost is 16 and our variable cost is 18. Now, our total cost is a sum of fixed plus variable, so 16 plus 18. So this is going to give you 34. Again, it's just simple math. You need to know the formulas for each of these in order to answer these questions. Now, average fixed cost. Our average fixed cost, again, the formula is fixed cost divided by quantity. Here, our fixed cost is 16 and our quantity is 1. So 16 divided by 1 is 16. Now, average variable cost, it's variable cost divided by quantity. So it's 18 divided by 1, which is 18. Now, average total cost, it's going to be total cost divided by quantity, which is, again, 34. Now we can calculate marginal cost. Now, the formula for marginal cost is the change in quantity divided by the change in, or the change in total cost divided by the change in quantity. So the change in quantity is 16 to 34. So the math, again, will be 34 minus 16 divided by the difference between 0 and 1. So 1 minus 0. And that is going to give you 18. So it's always going to be the difference between your two costs divided by the difference between your two quantities. Again, this will always hold true through every single row that we complete. Okay, now we're going to do the second quantity. So our total cost in this case is 16 plus 31, which is 47. Average fixed cost is going to be 16 divided by 2, which is 8. Now our average variable cost is going to be 31 divided by 2, and that's going to give you 15.5. Now our average total cost is 47 divided by 2, which will give you 23.50. Now our marginal cost is going to be the difference between 47 and 34, and then 2 and 1. And that should give you 13. Again, the formula for marginal cost is a change. It's the change in total cost divided by the change in quantity. Okay, now for the third one, what we're going to do, I'm just going to start filling out these the answers to this. So if you want to go ahead and pause the video and answer the questions, you can. 57, 5.33, 13.67, 19, 10, and then for our last one, it's going to be 65, 4, 12.25, 16.25, and then 8. So this is what it should look like. Again, by doing the calculations, you should be able to answer these questions. All right, so here we have another problem. Sometimes I will make you work backwards. So I'll give you average variable cost. I'll give you your quantity, and I'm going to ask you what is your variable cost. So the first step you should do is always write out the formula for average variable cost. Average variable cost equals variable cost divided by Q. Now you just plug in what you know. You know average variable cost, you know quantity. You want to calculate for variable cost. So it's going to be 10 equals VC, that's what you want to know, multiplied by 2. Now you just cross multiply, so you multiply this side by 2, this cancels out this side by 2, and your variable cost equals 20. All right, so another problem would be when your total cost goes from 47 to 57 and your marginal cost equals 10, what is the change in quantity? So the formula for marginal cost, again, it's a change in total cost divided by the change in quantity, which is what is illustrated here, TC2 minus TC1 divided by Q2 minus Q1. Just plug in what you have. So 10 equals 57, that's your TC2, minus 47, TC1. Now what you want to solve for is Q. Now you're going to cross multiply, so it's going to be 10Q equals 10. 10 divided by 10. The change in quantity is going to equal 1. So again, you should be able to do this for your exam as well as the worksheet that's due this week. just work backwards, set up the equations, and illustrate your steps. It's going to make your life a lot easier, and it'll be better for you in the long run when you perform these on the exam as well as quizzes. If you guys have any questions, drop a comment, email me any questions, or come to our virtual meetings this week. I'm more than happy to help. Other than that, I hope you guys have a good week, and this video helps. Have a good one.